G'day, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Scale HQ podcast, where I talk with John Knight, the founder and managing director of businessDEPOT, fantastic Australian business. You'll hear all about the context when we first get in there, but they have a really fascinating business where they sort of grew up in accounting with a few additional services, and then they have broadened their services under one umbrella to many things from legal to marketing to capital raising to M&A to real estate to tax to super to all sorts of stuff that helps their clients solve problems as they grow up and scale up. One of the things that's really interesting about this episode is, I'm always talking about big bets, like doubling down on 2 to 3 key things that create medium-term competitive advantage in your business so that you end up with a better business model, not just a bigger one, because bigger without becoming better is actually becoming weaker. It's a bad path to be on. It makes you easier to disrupt. You're so consumed with just generating revenue, you're forgetting about actually how you're going to be different in the medium term. And the bigger you get, the more you've got to risk. And somebody comes along and disrupts your business model because you're not actually focused on your customers. You're just focused on acquiring more customers. That is a difficult path. You need to become a better business. That's what we teach in the Scale Ups Roadmap program, by the way, but more about that later. But that's exactly what businessDEPOT have done. So I think you're really going to love this story. They've grown from 25 to 100 people over the course of 9 years across a whole bunch of different services. They're now expanding domestically in Australia, but also planning to expand internationally. But if you listen right to the end, we also talk with John about how they've brought values and behaviours to life in some really unique ways, which is not easy when you have subsidiary model like they do. So they've got all these equity partners who are running all these different discipline areas. So, the person who's running the marketing practice or the people and culture practice is probably an equity holder in a subsidiary, and therefore they have some of their own interests, but they also need to present as one group with one set of values and behaviors. That's not easy when you have so many subsidiaries. So I think they've learned a lot of things about values and behaviors, and at the end, I think John's done a great job in sharing some really practical and specific insights as to how you might want to think about that in your business. Finally, before you listen to today's episode, I am taking 2 weeks of holidays. So enjoy the break from me while I take a little bit of time out, and I'll be back in your ears very soon. Make sure you click on the bell or the notification button in Spotify or Apple or whatever you're listening on so that when we re-emerge, you don't miss a thing. Enjoy this episode with the very human founder and managing director of businessDEPOT, John Knight. Welcome to the Scale HQ podcast, your weekly injection of tips and insights into the secrets of scaling. I'm your host, Sean Steele, and I am obsessed with figuring out how to help founders just like you who are creating real value in the world to scale up so they can fulfill their potential. I do that each week by interviewing founders who successfully scaled, experts in all the areas of business that you need to master, interviews with founders who are still on the way up, and 10-minute tutorials and reflections from me based on my experiences in creating $100 million in revenue for 4 other companies over 8 years. So let's dive in and see what gems we can find together on this week's episode of the Scale HQ podcast. G'day, everybody, and welcome back to the Scale HQ podcast. Welcome back to our regular listeners and to anybody joining us for the first time. We are thrilled to have you. My guest this week is John Knight, founder and managing director of businessDEPOT. How are you, John?
I'm very good. Thank you, Sean. Thanks for having me along.
Mate, it's lovely to have you. Some people, if you've been listening to us for long enough, you may recognize the name businessDEPOT because a peer entrepreneur, like a mate of mine, introduced me to Brad Conn, who did his company and family accounting. Brad Conn is one of your directors of accounting. And on episode 20, Brad and I unpacked a whole bunch of things around, what founders need to focus on, fundamentally to avoid failing while scaling. So quite an interesting episode for you guys to go back to. But I always found, and particularly in that episode, I was like, the businessDEPOT has a really interesting business model because it kind of looks like you grew up in accounting and then you spread your wings into the, a lot of other services, like to list a few from your website: bookkeeping, business broking, capital raising, digital, e-commerce, financial planning, franchising, legal, marketing, M&A, people and culture, real estate, super, tax. Like that is a lot of services.
Yes, we haven't chosen the easy route, Sean.
That's what it looks like. But it's exciting. And you grew up in Brisbane. It looks like you got a couple of offices in Sydney now. And I saw, when I was researching, saw on your LinkedIn profile that I think it was late last year, you turned 9. And 10 years ago or 9 years ago, you had 24 people, and now you've got a bit over 100.
Yeah, we're about that 100 mark now. It's funny, you mentioned the growing up in Brisbane. Our business grew up in Brisbane. Our business baby grew up in Brisbane, but
Mhm.
I grew up out bush, and that was probably a real foundation for why I even care about business so much.
Tell me about why do you tell me about that,
Well,
that
well,
kinda thing?
growing
I'm
up in a
interested in the
family
genesis.
business. Yeah, no, growing up in a family business in a country town, I literally was born into the business. I was taken home from the hospital and into the business and the house. They were all the one and the same thing. My dad was the local Sparky, and we'd have the
Sparky,
tradies
okay.
pulling in the morning. I'd hear the old school fax machine going off in the morning, and I never knew anything different. But having a
Mm,
business mindset or a family business mindset around, and I
mhm,
suppose you see the different challenges, you see the different roadblocks. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I reflected on that and realized that that was probably very much the foundation of why I care about business owners and why I care so much about helping them get through the challenges that are holding them back.
mm. That's so interesting. And so then did you end up doing, any of the accounting for the obviously from looks like from your profile in 1993, you kicked off as maybe an intern or something as an accountant? Did you
Yeah,
end
well,
up
I
doing
went to I
anything with
went
the
to
family?
uni. Yeah, so I went to uni and did accounting because I didn't know what else to do, like many accountants. And I did a couple of years out in Toowoomba because mummy didn't want me to move down to the big smoke sort of thing, and ended up moving down here, and ended up down here, and I tried a whole range of different types of accounting services and so forth, and got to a point where I was a full equity partner in a more traditional accounting practice,
Mm,
and it was at that point that we said there's more problems we can solve here. And that's why we set up Business Depot. We didn't want to be XYZ chartered accountants saying we were more proactive, saying we were doing more for everyone. We actually wanted to spin it on its head and actually create a place for people to go to. And it's just so happens that accounting is one of those services that we offer.
so when you said in your post that, you started 9 years ago with 24 people, what did that look like? Was it an accounting practice of 24 and then you went, "We're not doing enough here for our clients," and that's what created Business Depot? Or how did
Yeah,
that
well, I was able to negotiate to take my clients and my fees out of the previous firm that we were with. We also had
Ah.
one of my other founding directors and Bradley Conn, who you mentioned. They
Mhm.
all came from that, so we came across with about 24 people, and so we
Got it.
negotiated to take that out of the accounting business. So that became our foundation. And when we
Cool.
launched, we did accounting, we did specialist tax, we did bookkeeping, we did self-managed
Mhm.
super funds, we did business coaching and advisory, and we had a real estate specialization, and we did business valuation. So we already had a pretty good cross section of
Mm.
services
Mhm.
within that sort of accounting and advisory sort of space. But it was never the intention to just do those services. It always was that those relationships would just be the beating heart of the business that would enable us to add other services as the need arises for clients.
Well, it's super interesting, right? Because, there's no right or wrong, but there's a continuum there of, doubling down and specializing and just trying to scale, one thing and being the master of it versus the other end of the continuum, which is focusing almost exclusively on the I'm not saying you don't focus on the customer on one end, but on the other end going, well, I've got a customer here who's got other problems who we can solve. We're trusted by them. Why don't we build services that solve those? But it is going to diversify our areas of specialization and solve more problems for the same customers. Tell me about how you thought about that.
Well, look, I think it was just very human centric. It was very much about the business owner. What's going
Mm,
on in the business owner's world? And yeah, my personality type, if anyone knows Myers Briggs, is ENFP. So I'm like off the Richter scale with F. So I'm off the Richter scale with
mhm,
caring about people, not wanting to have hard conversations and so forth. So when I'm sitting down having chats with business owners and they're telling me about their problems, I have this natural inclination to try and solve it. So
mm,
very early on with Business Depot, we very much positioned ourselves as, depot, the place to go. So therefore, if someone's coming to us to solve a problem, we had to live our brand and we had to find someone who could solve that problem, even if it wasn't us. And so
mhm,
naturally over time, with an ethos of if we don't do it ourselves, we find someone else, we built these relationships. Over time, some of those services came in-house and some services are still referred out. And
mhm.
it's very rewarding to actually help somebody get over a challenge within their
Yeah.
business and see them project along to achieve the vision that they want to achieve because we had that little tiny part to play on one little part of their business when they were stuck.
And when you like, I have this. I mean, it's wonderful to hear, and so I'm going to make sure that I tag all of my clients in this one because we have this conversation regularly about if you're in a B2B business, you and you've got trust, that client feels like you are, a firm that has their best interests at heart. You always give independent and fearless advice, even if it's not in your best interest. You've always got their best interests at heart. So why would they want you to be the problem solver? That doesn't mean you have to have all of those things already in your business. To your point, it's about actually being able to bring together a solution, even if you're only a small part of that or not even a part of that, to help them continue to solve other problems. It continues to build trust. It continues to build stickiness and longevity in the relationship.
I mean, collaboration's a word thrown around way too much, but
Mm,
one of our values, we call them our that's depot statements, is collaborate to innovate. Like let's not try and hold on to something that we're not the best person to deliver.
mm,
If we are the best person to deliver, by all means, let's do it. But if we're not, give it to somebody else to do. The client will appreciate because they'll get a better result.
mm,
Um, it meant we were able to grow so much quicker because we didn't have a bucket load of cash just sitting there to buy in the services that we wanted to offer. We
mhm.
had to be more like a startup and we had to think more. I suppose we had to scrape through and just make decisions that enabled us to deliver more solutions to our clients, even though we couldn't employ those people in house and maybe didn't make any money out of it, making that referral.
Well, that's one of the things I really want to unpack today. It's like this business model to me is super interesting, and in practical terms, how you ended up doing that. Because there, you mentioned. So let's take it a step back. Out of all those services you got on your website, which I mentioned before, how many of those are people in house that do that for you, and they only work for Business Depot, versus referrals or sort of partners you might bring in to do that?
So those services on the front of our page, the ones you listed before, they're all provided by somebody within the Business Depot group.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
they're all in house.
But
Yep.
but we're not one entity. Okay.
Mm,
So yes, we have an accounting business still, and we do a lot of business advisory sort of services, and that's still the beating heart and still the biggest part of our business. But our
mhm,
legal business, for example, it's a separate entity. We've got a key person who has key equity within that separate company. Our
mhm,
capital raising business is a separate company with a key person within it. Our Sydney business is actually through a license arrangement. And
mhm.
so we don't actually own any equity in the Sydney business, but we've
Right.
been able to deliver more solutions to clients now down in New South Wales through a collaboration arrangement. We still make some money out of it. We still charge a license fee and so forth.
Mhm,
But to the outside world, it looks all one and the same. And I suppose what I think we've been able to do well within our structure is challenge the norm. Don't try and hold on to everything yourself, not be greedy. And with the foresight of solving problems first for the clients, we naturally grew from there without being precious about who gets what.
mm. I love this. I was inspired by this model when I realized that my accountant in Sydney, who I engaged because he was a property expert and I was doing a lot in property, he actually had 13 subsidiaries, and like you guys, he's got legal, he's got bookkeeping, he's got a whole range of services, and each one of those are a subsidiary model where the person who's doing the leading takes a 25% stake in that entity, and the parent company has 75%. They're obviously providing a lot of the leads and the customers, and they're hiring sort of delivery experts, if you like, who can drive the growth, but also will get, of course, cross fertilized from other disciplines that they are involved in. You would have learned a lot about how to make these kinds of collaboration models work. And is there quite a lot of variation in how you, or do you have or have you kind of learned over time and said this is the ideal way to set each one of these up, and they're almost the same each time you do it in terms of does the person get a salary? Is it are they just taking a percentage of revenue? Is it a subsidiary where they've got a specific amount of equity? Do you both put cash in, or do you guys only put the cash in? Like, can you tell
Yeah.
me a bit about that?
I think we've probably tried every option, Sean.
I bet.
And so there are ones that have failed for
Hmm.
different reasons. And we'll own those and we just end them when those relationships don't work.
Yeah.
So the way I think about it is we went wide on services in Brisbane.
Hmm.
And so slowly we were adding more services and adding more entities to enable us to deliver more services, solve more problems for the client. They
Hmm.
typically have worked by doing separate entities with a key person taking equity within that entity. They get a
Mhm.
salary still out of there. And if it's a startup, then we're both putting in capital from the beginning to get that going and to get that started.
Mhm.
Others have been a service where we've sort of spun it out from another entity into an own entity. For example, people and culture services that we provide was originally our internal HR and admin manager.
Mhm.
She got the drive and obviously hanging around entrepreneurs all the time, wanted to do her own sort of thing. And so we said,
Mhm.
well, why don't you start providing those services to the clients? And so that sort of we hived that out into a separate entity and did a deal
Mhm.
on the on the equity sort of stake and so forth.
Mhm.
It's an interesting conversation for me this right here right now, Sean, because coming into our 10th year, we are giving ourselves permission to question whether we've got the right structure and whether it's creating the right behavior.
Mm.
And in my thinking, it's all about, well, what are you focused on? Because historically, one of the things we focused on was actually a license fee model where
Mhm.
each entity would pay a percentage off the top
Yeah.
to an IP entity called Business Depot Proprietary Limited. And Business Depot provided some services for that, basically the brand, the website. I sort of worked through there by coaching other leaders and those types of things. And that model was
Mhm.
about um, getting a percentage off the top of income for
Mhm.
all the entities into that Business Depot entity.
Which is almost a
That's one
franchise
model.
model, I
Almost like a
guess.
franchise model, but we'd never call
Yeah.
it that, Sean.
Of
Um,
course not. Yeah.
but then there's other models which are more about creating the capital value. And so as you start to think about, well, what's the next 10 years look like? We need to start to think about, well, what is it that's going to be of value in 10 years' time? Is it
Mm.
the clip of the ticket off the top? Or is it the equity value that we create? And if it's equity value, does it get a higher multiple of earnings if it was all owned by one holding entity that owned a bit of all these entities? Or is
Mm.
it better valued separately? I
Mm.
think we all know the answer to that. I don't think we need to sort of question that too much. But from an equity perspective, my point is, if you're chasing equity, then you should structure it a different way. If you're chasing a clip of the ticket off the top, then you should structure it a different way. Or if your
Mm.
vision is away from both of those, then you need to be making sure your structure is aligned with that future vision,
Yeah.
not necessarily just what you're doing right now.
One of the words that you mentioned in there, which I think is a super important one, which is what a lot of founders, even if they don't have a subsidiary model or different, if they even if they're trying to engage their leaders, what they're trying to think about is how do I align our interests? How do I make sure that what gets created here is that we're both working towards the same goal and we're not actually both driven by something slightly different, which just starts to cause tension in terms of the behaviors. Like we want to be aligned, we want to be succeeding together. So if you're somebody driving a subsidiary, do you then rely your I guess the value you're getting out of that business is fundamentally dividends along the way plus a wage because you've got some equity in the business, but then they don't have control, I assume, to be able to sell off that entity to anybody else, and so they would have to only ever get let's say a capital event if the whole business is sold. Is that how it would work?
Yep, that's how it would work.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose to follow up on your point about how do we get alignment, alignment is through culture, alignment is through behaviors, and alignment is through values. And very early on in my days with Business Depot, a great mentor of mine said to me about just banged on constantly about values and behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And our culture and is probably one of the things I'm most proud of. The ability for us where we physically have silos of different entities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the ability for us to look and feel and act as one business and nobody's precious about, "Oh, I just gave you a referral, give me a referral fee." We don't do that. Um, the We have a group of people that are aligned on a vision to help business owners get through whatever hurdles are holding them back. And so people are happy to give that referral to somebody else because it helps them get over that challenge. And
Mm-hmm.
it's that culture that I think means we've got people sharing information or technical information, sharing technical information, helping people with no charge whatsoever, because it comes around in spades later on down the track because of the
Mm-hmm.
trust that it creates.
Mm. And I imagine then, one of the benefits and one of the special parts of that model becomes if you're the marketing person and you're dealing with clients and the clients have got a legal need, it's in your best interest to make sure that the person who's running legal is also of really high quality, because that's what's going to make you want to refer. You're interested in helping the client solve a problem. You're looking for people that you can trust to help them solve that. And does that mean that you end up getting? Do you get sort of referrals from the people who are running each of the disciplines to other people who can run other disciplines
Totally.
because they want to be surrounded by people like them with of the right caliber?
Totally, totally. So
Mm,
it's really interesting where the referrals, the internal referrals, sort of come from. And I always talk about a head of one of the divisions. I always talk to them about, well, you've also got to do your internal sales. By you being available to answer those questions, by you popping your head into a meeting to help solve a problem
mm,
very quickly. That's your internal sales process, so that people have confidence and understand what you do, so that
mm,
when they're out there talking to a business owner and they find a need, they can say, well, maybe you should have a chat to Kirsty within marketing, or maybe you
mm,
should have a chat to Cameron within legal.
mhm,
Um, and we're never pushy about that. I know there's some disciplinary operations where they're quite like, they mine the data and they go, your loan's up for renewal here. Now go talk to our mortgage broker, then go talk to our
mm,
estate planner and those types of things. I
mm,
tend to take more of what I call a washing machine approach, which is basically we just want all our clients in the broader business depot model and going round and round and round. And as they're going round in the washing machine, when the need arises, when they've got something that they need some help with, we just want them to think of us. And if
mm,
they think of us for marketing or for HR or for legal or whatever at that point in time, then I've done my job with the brand to make sure that we are at least in the discussion as to whether we're the right people to help them.
mm. So good. What about the inherent challenges with the model? What's the most, there's obviously
Oh, it's
some
easy,
clear
Sean.
benefits
There's
we've
no
got.
challenges whatsoever.
It's just smooth sailing, right?
Smooth sailing. I always love it. I love. Often I have. Uh, Usually they're quite a senior accountant say to me, "Oh yeah, I always had the idea for that model. I was always going to do that sort of thing." Um, and there's not many that have actually pulled off the breadth of services
Mm, hmm.
that we've had. And I don't say that. I try to say that without any sort of arrogance or anything, but
Yeah.
it's not easy,
Mm,
and not everyone's done it the same way, and some have done it even harder way. Um, but the challenges are people. They're the
yeah.
most rewarding part of it, but they are also the biggest challenge,
Hmm.
because in
Can you be more
profession.
specific? Like what specifically? What's the challenge there, people wise?
I mean, people have their own lives. People have their own things that are going on. And so you always want people to be with your brand for a long period of time. Um, Sometimes you bring people that you shouldn't bring in. Sometimes you have people who are snakes in the grass and actually are not aligned, even if they say they are.
Mm,
And so there's a whole range of things that come up with people. And the reality is they're humans and they have emotions, and, people leave because they're, I don't know, returning to Sweden. We can't
hmm.
stop that. And we would
Mm,
love to have consistency of people for longer and longer tenure. But the reality is in professional services, the average tenure is reducing. There's less people going into professional services as an option. And so it's our biggest barrier to success is actually the delivery of work. We cannot get enough people who are wired our way to deliver the
mm,
work how we want to
mm.
deliver it. And that is undoubtedly, I would suggest, the biggest challenge with professional services, in particular
Yeah.
in accounting and business advisory sort of spaces right now.
And so, given that challenge, sounds like there's a market force there. Why is why are there less people coming into professional services from your perspective?
Well, it doesn't help when you've got teachers at high school saying that accountants are not going to have a job in the next decade because the robots are going to take it over.
That's true.
Okay. My daughter finished grade 12 last year, and there was 8 kids in her class at a all girls Catholic school in Brisbane here, and she had 8 kids who chose to do accounting at school.
Yeah.
The schools aren't investing in it, and I think the schools are even actually saying to the students, "Oh, that option might not be around in 10 years' time. And so there's
Mm,
less people going to uni. So we need the migrants and so forth to sort of come in. We need
mhm,
the AI, we need the technology, we need the offshoring to happen so that we can focus on the customer experience
mhm.
more. And so none of it's insurmountable. It's just a challenge for where the industry is right now.
Now, what if I told you that with just 15 minutes of effort, you could find out the top 3 things that are going to hold your business back from scaling in a sustainable way so that you can fulfill its potential and you can enjoy it as much as you deserve to? And what if I told you in that same 15 minutes of effort, you can find out how your business stacks up against thousands of other businesses who've taken the same test so you can actually see how you compare? If that sounds interesting, you need to head straight over to scalehq.com.au/growth score. You're going to complete a short survey and you're going to get back in your inbox a free 9-page report that's going to show you how you stack up versus your peers and where you need to focus to unlock scalability and a greater level of enjoyment in your business. And for a limited time, I'm going to offer you a free 30-minute debrief on the report where myself or one of our Scale HQ founder mentors, who are all experienced CEOs and have scaled successfully, will unpack your specific report with you. We've done hundreds of these, and so we know exactly how to help you get the most out of the insights in there. There's no selling from us, just lots of value for you. Head over to scalehq.com.au/growth score and get your free growth score report right now. You are going to love it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so, given the challenges that are inherent in that, I mean, there's even more. There's more complexity than even just having an internal. Everybody's a full time, or everybody works for the brand. There's no separate entities. There's no profit sharing. There's no equity, which does create a different dynamic in relationships. Given everything that you've learned in the last 10 years about what's worked and what hasn't worked, how are you thinking about the business model for the next 10 years? Are there any major shifts coming? How are you thinking about taking the learnings forward?
Oh, look, I think we just have to solve the problem of delivery. And as I said, that's the technology and the offshoring and whatever it is that I
Mm-hmm.
think the industry is going to come up against. And so we have to embrace that. 10 years ago, when we launched Business Depot, we were probably ahead of the curve a little bit with the technology, and we were probably changing things that probably weren't quite ready for us to do it, but we
Mm-hmm.
went with it. Um, and we're just at that phase now where it's for the next horizon. What's that next change that we have to get ready for and we have to implement right now?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the human factor of things will actually get more important. I mean, one of our other values is keep it real, and that's all about vulnerable trust, bringing your true self to work, and those types of things. And
Mm-hmm.
because we have such a human culture, um, we actually probably have more feelings and emotions that come out within a work environment because we're asking people to bring their true self to work.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned before the Myers-Briggs sort of personality type. I think like 95% of our people have an F within their personality type, which
Really?
is a little bit
Wow.
scary. It's like it's off the Richter. And I
Okay.
noticed it one day on our little map of personality types, and I go, this could be a
Mm.
problem. Uh, but the reason they're all Fs is because one of the things that we require from people is to have empathy and to
Mm.
care for your clients. And so
Mm.
we don't tend to attract people that come in and they're just cookie cutter, sort of just get the
Yeah.
job done and they don't care about the
Just
result.
process. Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason I say that is the human part's going to become even more important. So from
Mm.
a strategic pendulum, as on one breath I say we have to embrace technology and we have to embrace offshoring. On the other end, the customer experience I think will become more human, that they'll want more human interaction,
Yeah.
more insights
Yeah.
from a conversational sort of basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree with you. I always think, whether you put a broad brush around it and say, we're talking about technology, the whole idea is, whether it's using generative AI or some other myriad of technology tools, it's like, how do you allow people to be more human? Is always the way I think about it. It's like, how do you help them when you look at the way they spend their week? If they're spending 40% of their time doing admin, follow up, like stuff that can be automated, stuff that could be done by a machine, great, do that, because they've got this incredible capability that will never be replaced. That is very human. How do I free them up to be more human, spend more time with clients, and more
Mm.
opportunities to create value that way? Because to your point, the lowest level activities are more easily automated. All the ones that are repetitive or very specifically
And we get
deep
rid of
in.
those, yeah, get rid of those little things or make it easier to get the deep insights, then
Mm,
empathy becomes our superpower.
yeah.
Because that then means we are going to be able to have so much better a conversation with our clients and
Yeah.
help them out.
Interesting. What just from a this business model, is it you've really doubled down on this business model, and I love it. I think it's and there's lots to learn. There's lots to learn for that, and I think I'll unpack a bit of that for our audience. But what's it done? One of the assumed commercial benefits for people when they hear a business model like this is if you've got essentially you've got a trust with a customer and you're able to solve more problems around that customer than you can with just a single discipline business that you scale up. One would assume that the I don't know, in commercial terms, the lifetime value of customer becomes greater because ultimately they're spending more money inside your group than they would have spent that same money, but they would have gone elsewhere outside the group. Do you end up quantifying that or being able to see that impact the financials and the health, commercially of the business?
I'd say absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes, the lifetime value of the client is higher, but also the cost of acquisition is spread across more. And
yeah,
so the cost of acquisition for a higher value client comes down as a percentage as well.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and so I've always been, I suppose, big on brand marketing. If you think of it that
Hmm.
way, I've always been big on. In the early days, we did a lot of events. We did a lot of during COVID. We did a lot of webinars for free. We always were very generous with content and insights and those types of things. And so creating that brand awareness was great because when we launched Business Depot Legal, for example, they go, "Oh, we thought you were just accountants." And they go, "Oh,
Hmm.
we trust them. We trust you
Mm,
now as well."
mm,
But again, we're never pushy with selling
yeah,
across the different services.
yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Have I done the actual precise calculations of it? No, I haven't.
Mm,
And my natural personality type, again, Sean, is I'm less
fair
your
enough.
detail man and I'm less your sort of I'm an accountant, so I can do it, but
Yeah,
I'm more your big picture perception.
yeah.
And so I know when things are going well in that
Hmm.
regard,
Hmm.
and I bring the other people in to do those calculations and things
Yeah,
for me.
that's perfect. No problems at
Yeah.
all. With the benefit of hindsight, what's been the biggest benefit? Maybe it wasn't obvious to you at the start that there would be a major benefit that emerged as you built scale through this business model. With the benefit of hindsight, has there been a big benefit that's really arisen that was unexpected?
Um, what comes to mind when you ask me that one, Sean, is when we first moved into our premises here, and we found an office that we wanted, and it was too big for what we needed. And what we did was the landlord said, "Well, take the whole space. I'll give you the first 12 months of the extra space for free, and then we'll do it at a cheap rate, and then we'll sort of get to some normal sort of rates." And so what we did was we turned that excess space into a co-working space. Um, and at the time, it was just a cost sort of consideration. Well, we
Hmm.
weren't paying rent. Let's try and break some money in. But what it did for the brand and what it did for the business and what it did for the culture probably was something I was surprised by. Because
Hmm.
what it meant was we had all these different entrepreneurs walking in and out of our office and bringing a different energy to the place. And so the conversations around the coffee machine were different than it was just us from the early days.
Hmm.
So, you'd have a startup sort of tech company, or you'd have a events company, or a whole range of different people. And so something which was seen probably as a problem we were solving actually turned into, I think, one of our great superpowers in the early days, because people we didn't know and weren't connected to our brand were walking in the door. They'd bring their clients in. Their clients would then go, "What is this place?" But
Hmm.
it also made the energy different around the place
Hmm.
as well.
And do you still have that today? You still own this co-working
No, we
space?
don't. We got rid of the co-working space at the start of COVID because we
Hmm.
didn't want people bringing germs in and so
Hmm.
forth, and we needed the space back.
Mm.
Um, and
Uh-huh.
so we didn't value it enough to go and get more space to do it, but
Yeah.
that's partly because we wouldn't get the benefit from it if they weren't
Mm.
actually in our space.
So what have you done in the sort of, work from home, hybrid, fully remote, everybody in house? What did you do through COVID and how have you what have you normalized, I guess, now?
Yeah, I suppose, we just made everyone work from home during COVID. We're
Mhm.
100% cloud-based already, so that wasn't too hard. We just had to get a bit of hardware with a few extra screens and things for people.
Mhm.
Um, Whether it's normalized yet or not, I don't know. Um, we we offer flexibility, but we ask people to apply for the flexibility. So if
Mhm.
somebody wants to work Fridays and Wednesdays from home, we ask them to apply for that. It really is on a case by case situation, and I think it's
Mhm.
still a bit of watch this space
Yeah.
in this regard, because what's what we've got now is we have all different people with all different sort of plans and all different things to suit them.
Mm.
Um, I think there has to be something that happens at some point in time, because it's near impossible to have everybody in the office at one particular time at the
Mm.
moment. And if we're
Mhm.
trying to have a town hall sort of discussion, or I don't know, barbecue on the deck or something or other, you've got to move the time of it all the time to make
Mm.
sure you allow for the people who don't work in the office on Fridays, or your
Yeah.
people that start at 7:30 and finish at 4. Like it is challenging as a leader in the business to deal with how much flexibility we have out there at the moment.
Yeah. It's a bit, I mean, obviously the pendulum for a lot, all good health reasons went completely to the full flexibility, everybody from home, etc. This whole new hybrid model, I was listening to a podcast yesterday where some of the largest companies in Silicon Valley said it's absolutely proven now the experiment has failed and fully remote no longer it doesn't work. What worked, and the reason, their perspective was the reason we all fooled ourselves into thinking this was a new possible normal was because we already all had existing teams at that point in time who already had relationships. So when they moved away from each other, they were able to continue those relationships because they already had trust. But now, in a fully remote model, when you bring somebody new into an organization, the ability to bind them to the culture, to help them understand values and behaviors, all of those, building new teams and continuing to scale becomes, in their perspective, problematic when there's not sufficient interactivity and collegiality that comes from those human interactions that are hard to replace on a
And
screen.
and I would say there is exceptions to that, in that the all in or all out, I think you can still build culture
Mm.
all out. I don't think it'd be my natural style to do that, because I'm more of a
Hmm.
face to face sort of guy.
Yeah.
So I think you can do it, but this hybrid in the middle is probably the
Mm.
challenge for everybody at the
It's hard, isn't
moment. In
it?
that you've got half in, half out, and you're not making anybody happy. No one's
Yes.
getting an amazing experience,
Yeah.
and that becomes the challenge as you grow.
Definitely a watch this space
Mm,
kind of scenario. I certainly don't know what the solution is because they all seem to be problematic at the
mm,
moment, as you said. And in this middle bit, no one seems to be getting
mm,
what they need, which is
mm,
tricky.
mm.
What if we take a step back from the business? And thank you so much because it's just such an interesting business model from my perspective. If you think about, I mean, you were 9 years ago you were 25 people, you're now 100 people, so the business has really grown in size. What's one or two pieces of advice that you've received along the way that really has impacted the way that you've built this business or supported you when you faced some big challenges? Like, what was the scenario? What was the advice? Who gave it to you, and how did it actually help you?
Yeah. I suppose a couple of things come to mind. There's always a solution. You're going to have different challenges, different people leaving, or different things that are going on. And sometimes you just need to shake it up and think about it a little bit differently, to put a positive spin on it, or to find how you're going to move forward on that particular matter. Um, I then go the values and the behaviors, and just the importance of just doctrinating that within the business. When we have little bits of culture issues start to pop up, it's because we haven't been talking about our values enough. And very early on, when we launched Business Depot, there was this dialogue around that's Depot, well, that's not Depot. And it started because people were trying to work out who we were, and
Mm.
we were leaving a traditional sort of environment. We were going to a modern, different sort of environment. And so we were very clearly coming up with sort of rules, and people would naturally sort of say that's Depot and that's not Depot. So we call our value statements our that's Depot statements. And the idea of that is it to encourage people to go, that's Depot. Oh no,
Mm.
that's not Depot, which is just as important to say,
Mm.
John, why are you doing that? That's not
Yeah,
Depot.
that's not defo. I love that.
Yeah.
Can you give
Um,
me, John, two or three things that because I'm absolutely with you on values and behaviors and how people bring them into rituals or symbols or things that become entrenched that help the sustainability and the livability of the values and behaviors. And given you've got a business model where you've got all these different entities, and therefore, some people who are fully connected and some people maybe are a little bit on the side, what are some of the things that you really treasure that you think have done a great job in helping the values and behaviors become sticky and sort of live?
Yeah. Well, the first would be how we talk about them, like I just
Mm-hmm.
said about the That's Depot, treating it that way. The second would be um, don't have to do absolutely everything exactly the same, but it's what are the values and the behaviors that are non-negotiable. So
Mm-hmm.
that they have to be the fundamental sort of values because some divisions want to be a bit different in a particular sort of area. They want to
Mm-hmm.
do some things that are specific to them. And the people we have as key people and leaders within that business, they want to put their own little sort of mark on their little patch as well.
Sure.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's okay as long as the fundamentals are aligned. The other thing we do with
How
our
many are they, by
values,
the way, John?
how many
How many?
shareholders overall?
No. How many values or
But
all the sort
it's
of
five.
statements?
So
5.
we've
Okay.
got
Yep.
5.
Mhm.
We originally had 10, and we had to condense them down. It was way too many. But
Mhm.
it started from a good place of trying to clarify things, and then we were able to condense some together.
Can you
My
share
fa-
these non-negotiables? I'd love to hear them.
yeah, no, absolutely. So we've got guts to do things differently, collaborate to innovate, keep it real, bring the wow, and my favorite, give a shit. And so they've come from a lot of work over the years of
Mm.
refining them. And I
Mhm.
suppose one thing I'd say about values is your values can change. Some people say they never ever change, but we're 10 years on, we're a different group of people.
Yeah.
What's important to us now and what's important to the next horizon might be slightly different. And so it's okay to give yourself permission to challenge those every now and then when you've
Mm.
got a different group of people.
I
And
think
probably
there's almost a so the one thing I was just thinking that raised for me is there's almost a litmus test in the way I think about values and behaviors is they have to reflect who we are now, but they also have to create some cognitive dissonance, some tension between who we are and who we're trying to become. And
yeah,
so, if there's not any tension in there, then they end up becoming quite static. They're not actually helping you move forward. And so, they can't all be about who you want to be that you're not today, but there has to create that elevation, that sort of lift towards something that's not always easy. And so, I think that's why, as you said, the business becomes a different size, it
mm,
maybe takes a different direction. That means the team may have to act in a different way or
mm,
something else may need to be important. So,
yeah,
some renewal
totally.
is good.
Yeah. One of the other things I'll say on the values or the That's Depot statements is that you will notice that they were statements, they weren't one words.
Hmm.
So bring the wow or keep it real. That was quite
They're
intentional.
very
That it,
active.
they're very active. So they're almost descriptive
Hmm.
rather than integrity
Hmm.
empathy and those types of things. And we also
Yeah.
we use Slack for our internal communication. And so
Hmm.
we have an emoji which we attach to each That's Depot statement. And
Ah,
so if
cool.
somebody sees something, someone says something on Slack and they think it's in line with one of the That's Depot statements, we want them to just react with one of the emojis.
Nice.
Um, and so that is just another way that we try to get some buy-in, I suppose, on the values on a
Hmm.
regular basis.
And do you do any like awards or sort of is there recognition stuff around the values? Like are people
Yeah.
nominating each other in addition to that?
Yeah, so we do. They used to be monthly. I think we've changed them to bi-monthly now, where we do our That's Depot awards. We do
Hmm.
2 awards. We ask everybody to nominate somebody for an award or somebody's done something good in accordance with the That's Depot statements. And we give out 2 awards. One is the person who receives the most nominations. That's the That's Depot award. But the second one, and this one came from the team, and I really love this one. We call this the Victory Award, and we have a tree which is a physical sort of statue of a tree. And the
Hmm.
person who gets the victory award is the person who made the most nominations. So we're
Hmm.
rewarding the person who
Ah, cool.
takes the effort to acknowledge other people. And
Mm.
if they get the tree, they get to put something on the tree, something that might be depot reflective or part of an event or something or other. And so we've got this growing sort of beast. We had to get a new tree recently because a few things exploded on there and it got a bit gross. The red frog lollies started to get a bit gross on there and so forth. And
Love it.
um, but I think that's important in that awards, that recognition of the people who take the effort to make
Mm.
the nominations. I think
Mm.
is underrated.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. Without those people, you don't see the other people lifting up towards it. So,
And then we share what everyone said about everyone else as well. So we share all the comments.
mhm.
Then so everybody can go in and have a look. What did someone say about me, even though I didn't win an award?
And are they anonymized? Are they depersonalized as to who said the comment, or
No.
is that called that as well?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, cool. Like it. Nice. Can I ask you, John, about the future? I mean, you talked about, you alluded to the fact that everyone's running around thinking about how all these jobs are going to be replaced and so on when it comes to things like generative AI. How do you think? I mean, you've got a broad list of services, so I'm sure it's been a topic of discussion at the leadership table around where are the opportunities to where do we see that there's a whole bunch of augmentation opportunity where we can uplift services, we can make things cheaper, we can make it more efficient, more effective. Where are the places that you think it's going to be most applicable, and are there areas of the business where you think actually it's going to be quite disruptive?
Yeah, I think where it will help is with the little things, not the big
Hmm.
things. So
Mm.
those removing the need to do, I don't know, the quarterly BAS. So if something was automated to make the quarterly BAS done for clients, fan bloody tastic, because no one loves doing a BAS anyway. Um, but so I think that's where a lot of the help will come from, doing the little things, which will free up the humans to do the better, more important
Mm.
things.
Mm.
And look, I think every services industry is going to be impacted by it. I think there's a lot of forces within services generally, whether it be AI and technology, what I call the Uberification of services, where everyone's breaking. There's so many more businesses now that are tiny sort of providers of
Super
services.
niche. Mm.
Yeah, the super niche. I love niching. I mean, as we always had a real estate specialization with what we did, but I love the idea of getting other industry verticals because, we do rent roll broking, we do real estate accounting, we do real estate bookkeeping, we do real estate shareholders agreements and legal services and so forth. And so you got a really nice vertical then. And the insights you get from that industry by being across all those services sets you apart to your competitors as well.
Mm. Super interesting. One of the things that really jumps out to me from this conversation, John, is one of the things you've been able to do is actually build a really strong sort of medium term competitive advantage by doubling down on a business model that you thought would actually really create success with customers. And for those people listening who, when I'm not hosting the podcast, I run Scale HQ, and one of the things that we're just about to launch is our Scale Up's roadmap program. Part of which is really about building growth strategy. It's about building a better business, not just a bigger one, and making sure that you're spending the next 3 years ensuring that in 3 to 5 years' time you're actually going to have medium term competitive advantage, because that's really what strategy is about. And one of the things I love that you've done is you've doubled down on this way of doing business that's going to help clients who already have trust with you solve more problems by being able to access similar, different services, but with a similar ethos and a similar level of care and a similar level of integrity and a similar level of professionalism. So those values shine through in every one of those disciplines. I just think that's a great example of the kind of stuff that we teach in our course. So if anybody's listening and you would like to explore, your business model and your business strategy and figure out what parts of your business model you think you should actually double down on, we can help you with that in the Scale Up's roadmap program. You can jump onto scalehq.com.au and just click on courses and you'll see everything you need to know about it. I've got one last question for you though, John, which is the next 10 years. If we take that step back and go, okay, you've just gone from 25 to 100, you've built out a significant number of services, you've gone into Sydney to launch some more offices. In 10 years' time, or maybe even 5 years' time, what do you think Business Depot is going to look like? Where are you trying to take the business next?
Yeah, well, the big, hairy, audacious goal, I mean, and probably should firstly say, we probably exceeded our expectations. We probably didn't think we never set out to be big. We just kept taking the opportunities to get to where we are now. So
Mm-hmm,
we probably are bigger than we ever thought we were planning to be.
mm-hmm,
But when we've talked about big, hairy, audacious goals for the next 10 years, I suppose, I've always said 30 offices across Australia and New Zealand. But if I'm honest, I want to go overseas as well. Like, why
mm,
can't we take our model sort of overseas and do something with it? The 30 offices across Australia doesn't have to be owned by us. I don't have the money to go and buy 30 offices. I could buy them. There's heaps of people that want to sell. I could
mm,
go buy them and then widen their services and have different services that are offered nationally through online sort of abilities and so forth. Um, but that is driven more by there are so many business owners out there who just need help. They just need a trusted advisor to talk to about their business and can direct them to the right people to solve their problems. And when you get out to some of the regional areas like Toowoomba or Wagga Wagga or Lismore or some of these places, I think there's real opportunities and there's great businesses that we can help them achieve their vision. We can help them make happen whatever it is they're wanting to happen. And so we can do that through collaboration rather than through acquisition. Then I see no reason why we can't think bigger than Australia and New Zealand as well,
Mm.
and look at taking the model overseas at some point in time.
Love it. Well, that's an exciting. We're going to have to make sure that we of course get you back on, John, to talk about the journey as it continues to evolve, because that's a really exciting place to be. And having been referred into Bradley from somebody else that I trust, who's got a very high level of expectation for their accountants, you're obviously doing a great job in the accounting practice, and I love the way that you're building this business. Thank you so much for your generosity of time and wisdom today. With our audience, is there anything you've got a big group on this podcast of 7-figure founders trying to break into 8 or maybe low 8 figures trying to scale up? What's one piece of advice or sort of wisdom that you'd like to leave them with today?
I'd say growth isn't always the solution. So sometimes, it's better to be better than it is to just grow. And so, well, what's the quote? Better is better than more.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's better to just spend that time focusing on just getting things working, getting clarity and so forth. Take the foot off the pedal with growth, because there's no point growing when you can't deliver on it. You'll do more harm than good. And so that would probably be one of my sort of words of advice. But Sean, I'm an open book. If anybody is interested to know anything more about Business Depot, or they have any questions as to how we've done what we've done, we're not perfect. We have our own challenges, as we've talked about. But I'm always more than happy to share any of my learnings and any of my insights along the way.
Beautiful. Thanks, John. How would you recommend people get in contact with you if they did want to have a chat?
Pretty easy. You jump on our website, businessdepot.com.au. My mobile number, my email address is on there, but you can also connect on LinkedIn or Twitter.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, John. And I couldn't agree with you more. Everything in Scale HQ we do is to help clients build a better business, not just a bigger one. If you just get bigger, as you said, and you just focus on revenue growth, you're actually going to build a weaker business. You're going to be so busy feeding the machine, you're going to completely forget about your customers. You're actually going to be easier to disrupt, because the one who's really building the right relationship with their customers and solving more problems for them is going to be the one that ultimately wins in the end. They're the ones that are going to have the trust.
Totally.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate all your time today, John. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for having me.
The team here at Scale HQ hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Now, if you want to achieve scale, but you want to know what's going to hold you back, we can help. Head over to scalehq.com.au/growth score to get your free 9-page growth score report. That's going to help you understand where your top 3 barriers are to scale. And if you'd like, we'll even do a free debrief on the report for you with no obligations or expectations, just lots of value from some CEOs who've scaled to help you on your journey. That's scalehq.com.au/growth score, and find out what's holding you back from fulfilling the potential of your business today.